Welcome to this episode of Grassroots Advocacy. This is our 34th episode. If you haven't had an opportunity, please do take time to go back and look at the previous 33 episodes. They'll help you to gain a more global perspective of the advocacy initiative. So in this segment, what we're really going to do is we're going to build on some of the ideas that we've touched on in previous episodes. And one of those key ideas that we've touched on is the importance of being knowledgeable when it comes to your role as an advocate. And one of the particular topics that's very useful for you as a grassroots advocate is the topic of understanding residents' rights. When we think about residents' rights, it's important for us to understand that just because a person goes to a post-acute or long-term care setting, that they are not giving up their rights as citizens of this great land. There are a variety of documents that define or regulate or describe residents' rights. And so I want to take an opportunity to touch on a couple of those because they're going to help us really think about how we can speak up, be the voice for our residents in a more constructive way. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I need to know this? And you can think of it this way. Occasionally, as a first-line caregiver, as a certified nursing assistant, licensed nursing assistant, or whatever title you hold, you may be asked to do something that your residents don't particularly want to do. For example, I was recently visiting in a member center, and a nursing assistant shared with me that she gets very frustrated because she will go to a room and offer to do a shower, and a resident will decline. She'll go and share that with the nurse, and the nurse will say, "You got to make them do it." Well, this puts that nursing assistant and nursing assistants like her in a catch-22 situation where they may feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. And so understanding residents' rights helps you to better understand what you should be doing to meet their needs. So let's now look at some of those documents that help us to better understand residents' rights. Perhaps the overarching document for us is 42 CRF 483. That is the federal regulation that governs the post-acute and long-term care environment. Those regulations are also referred to sometimes as conditions of participation. Within the Code of Federal Regulation, there are a series of federal tags, or F tags, they're referred to during the survey process. Those F tags go from F550 through F586. And those are the federal regulation tags that correspond with residents' rights, which is 48310 specifically. In addition to the Code of Federal Regulations, we also have the Residents' Bill of Rights, which was established as part of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1987. We also have the Elder Justice Act is another document that talks about residents' rights. Then you have your state regulations, and something to keep in mind is that your state regulations should, generally speaking, mirror the federal regulations unless your state wished to add something specific that they felt that the federal regulation didn't particularly address. And then finally, when we think about documents that are relative to a resident's rights, we'd also want to consider what your organization's policies and procedures say with regard to residents' rights. What is your organization's standard of excellence when it comes to meeting the residents' needs and expectations? So, taking the time to study each of those documents and to understand what those documents say and to understand how those documents are applied in your care setting will be really important to you as an advocate in terms of being able to speak with confidence when it comes to meeting the needs of your elders. It's also important, and I'd like to encourage you to take the time to go look at these documents. The Code of Federal Regulation is hung or is on the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services website, pardon me. So you would want to go check that out. It's also cool to check out on that same website, you can also find Appendix PP, which are the interpretive guidelines. Those are guidelines that are created for the survey team so they can have some sense of whether a regulation is being complied with or not. Now, what I'd like to do next is look at some of the residents' rights. Now, we're not going to look at all of them because, as you can tell, there are quite a few. But what I wanted to do was highlight some of the key residents' rights that you as a first-line caregiver might encounter in your day-to-day delivery of care. So the first item that we want to look at is that a resident has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. When you think about our elders and them coming to the post-acute long-term care environment, as they're doing that, they're dealing with a variety of different physical and emotional effects. The physical effects may come from the fact that they are coming there as a result of a hip fracture or a result of a stroke or something of that nature. So there are physiological effects that are happening. And then there are sociological or psychological things that are happening as it relates to perhaps a sense of loss of independence, a sense of loss of self-worth or self-value. Maybe it's a sense of their mortality. They're realizing, hey, I'm getting older. I could pass. And so it's really important to think about when a person comes to the post-acute long-term care setting, it's really important that we are embodying and we are demonstrating and we are practicing presenting them with the dignity and respect that they deserve as our fellow human beings. Also, our elders have a right to be informed and to make treatment decisions. And I think that sometimes there's a risk, not so much in the post-acute care environment, but in the long-term care environment, there is sometimes a risk to think that maybe the person that you're caring for won't necessarily understand the ramifications of the decisions that they're asked to make, or that they won't understand the processes and procedures. It's our opportunity to make sure that they understand to the best of our ability what's going on, and that they are allowed to play and are afforded the opportunity to play an integral part in the decision-making process, and so that they completely understand. The next right that I wanted to touch on was their right to participate in their care planning processes. We have the responsibility to invite them to attend their care plans and to be an active participant when they can in their care planning process. Because what we see and what they see may not necessarily be exactly the same thing. And so it's really important that we include them in that process. The next right that I'd like to look at is reasonable accommodation for their needs. And here's an important thing, their preferences. So we're able to look and see, based upon their care plan, based on the minimum data set, the resident assessment protocol and other tools, we're able to see what their physiological needs are. And to some degree, we're able to see what their psychosocial needs are. That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is their preferences. And so a good example of that would be, I talked at the very beginning about the nursing assistant who had a resident who refused to receive care, who refused to receive a shower or to take a shower. And what we can look at there is, what is that resident's preference? For example, for me, I start every day out with a shower. My former wife, Lisa, she was the kind of person that liked to shower right before she went to bed so she was able to rest as she felt in a clean situation. And that, when you take a shower, is a preference. So it's important for us to think about those preferences. Are there foods that they prefer to eat? Are there foods that they prefer not to eat? So let's think about those preferences and what we can do to support and meet those preferences. The next right has to do with the ability to communicate. And communication, as we all know, takes on a variety of forms. Right now, you and I are communicating in a manner of speaking. When we think about the women and men that we serve, it's important to think about what is their primary means of communication, how they express their thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and are we creating situations where they're able to do that in a way that is comfortable to them and in a way that affords them privacy. When we provide them their privacy and when we support their communication, we get better outcomes. Pardon me. The next right that I wanted to touch on is the right to request, refuse, or discontinue treatment and to formulate an advance directive. It's really important for us to recognize that each of the people we care for is their own unique and individual person. And because they are their own unique and individual person, they have a right to say, I want this type of care, or I'd prefer not to have this type of care. They have the right to say, hey, I don't want to take a shower right now, or I don't want to eat right now, or I don't want to do therapy right now. They have the right to say that, and we have to honor that to the best of our ability. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't try to think about different ways of approaching that so that we're able to meet those needs in a way that is going to be constructive, that allows that person to achieve their highest level of practicable independence. The final right that I wanted to touch on, and please understand, these are not all of the rights, but the last right that I wanted to touch on is the right to express grievances. From time to time, the folks who live in the post-acute and long-term care environment become unhappy or dissatisfied or frustrated with the care that they receive, with their environment, with the dining experience, with a variety of things, as we all might. It's important for those women and men to be able to express their concerns in a way that allows them to get their point across and to see some result of their perspective. Now, keep in mind that, of course, these are not all of the residents' rights. There are a number of very specific and detailed residents' rights. That's why it's important for you to do a bit of research and to become better informed as it relates to residents' rights. When you fully understand residents' rights, you will be able to more effectively advocate on their behalf, because you will be doing it based upon allowing them or creating a situation where they have the ability to be the unique individuals that they are. As we wrap up our time together today, I'd like to conclude with this quotation. To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa. I look forward to being with you for the next episode of Grassroots Advocacy. Until then, be well.